everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of Caffeine Carrots. Excited to have you here. I have with me today Shannon Nishi. She's Director of Customer Success over at Customer IO. So, Shannon, if you would just tell us a little bit more about yourself or your role and what Customer IO offers.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Joe. I'm happy to be here today, and I have my caffeine as well. I made a cup of coffee special for this. Uh,
Perfect.
yeah, as you mentioned, I'm the Director of Customer Success at Customer IO, which is a messaging automation software used by marketers and product teams, and really making it centralizing your data so that you can message your customers at the right time, at the right place, in the right channel, and using all of that personalized data in real time. I have been with Customer IO since July of 2020. So in that time, we've seen a lot of growth on the team as our company has continued to grow, as our product has continued to grow, and our customer base as well.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, today, we've been talking a little bit about best practices and scaling our customer success teams and what that looks like, and some strategies as far as doing that, as well as identifying and executing on expansion opportunities. So, just to kind of kick that off a little bit, what are some of the things, as we are kind of fully into 2023 now? Are you noticing any trends or new things surfacing as far as challenges to your CS team or expanding the team, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think one challenge that our team has that I think everybody's experiencing to different degrees now is just the idea of scaling the customer success team to be able to do more with less, and really being able to use automation and tooling to your benefit so that your CSMs, your individual contributors, can contribute all of their strategic knowledge, all of their manual efforts where they're going to have the biggest impact. And not, trying to replicate manual processes over and over and over again, but really getting in and having the meaningful conversations with customers that help them grow their product, and making that more accessible to everybody at all tiers of the business. So I would say, that's something that's top of mind for us, just as we continue to grow quickly and our product keeps broadening, and we keep seeing different customers with new use cases that are a fit. So as we take on more and more, our teams also have to figure out how to keep up with that, and make sure that we're maintaining a great experience for all of our customers.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess, one thing that we've kind of heard from the market and our customers as well is just the challenges of efficiency, kind of like you alluded, doing more with less in some cases, or expanding the size of a CSM's account portfolio. So that's definitely something that's resonating, I think, with the market at large, especially when you have everything coming down from even big tech as far as budget consciousness and some limitations there and some challenges. So how are you guys currently tackling just the efficiency part of it, or like you said, kind of making the most of your time? What does that look like for you all?
I think one of the biggest changes that we put in place over the last year is just standardizing and structuring our onboarding program more. When I came onto the team, there were, I think, 4 people on the team, and I was hired with 3 other people, so we made 7. So when you're that small, it's really easy for everybody to kind of have their own spin on things, and maybe approaches things a little bit differently, which is great because you're able to try out a lot of things. And it's easy to communicate with that small group of people and quickly change. Once you get to a team size of around 25, which is where we are, it's much harder to do those things. And so it does become really important that you standardize things to some extent to create structure and give people the tools they need, and make sure that you're able to onboard people quickly to add members to the team, and that we're going to be able to guarantee success for the customers. So for us, that started with looking at our onboarding program and what that looked like. And, we definitely saw a big chunk of our customers that were maybe so we have a self-service tier where customers aren't working with customer success, but on our contracted plans that do work with a customer success manager, we were seeing that sometimes on the lower end of those contracts, customers were really heavily leveraging the CSM in the first 90 days to get onboarded. And, they're trying to learn the product. They want all the insider tips and tricks. And then once they're in there and they're familiar with the way our product works and our vocabulary, they don't need the customer success manager nearly as much. And especially for some of those, SMB businesses that don't have really high growth expectations, they're able to kind of put things in place and maybe they're slowly iterating, but they're not taking on brand new use cases every couple of months. They weren't necessarily leveraging the customer success services beyond that. So by us focusing on a 90-day onboarding program, we've also been able to just package that and sell that individually outside of the ongoing customer success program. So instead of allocating a customer success resource to a plan for an entire year, when we are pretty sure they're only going to need us for the first 90 days, we can be a little bit smarter about saying like, okay, let's just have a customer work with a customer success manager as an onboarding specialist. And then beyond that, we're moving into a pooled customer success model for those customers in particular. And that way, our customer success managers that, are working with customers on a more long-term basis are able to focus on the ones that have really high growth and that have really ambitious goals that they're going after and be that strategic eye and help figure out which parts of our product are going to play best into that strategy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So basically being strategic about deploying your resources, right? And what we hear a lot as well is time is obviously a commodity. It's kind of your most precious resource in a lot of ways. So how you're able to be strategic about where you spend your time, where you allocate those resources. I think a lot of that hinges on the ability in some ways to sort of segment your customers, like intelligently segment, dynamically segment customers. So that segmentation kind of plays a key role so that you can see which customers are, need you the most, where do you need to spend the most time. And I think, certainly maybe you guys have experienced this, but, a lot of what I hear is, as you just get started with a CS team, you're really small, you're developing your processes, you realize maybe early on that there is some need for segmentation, but it's pretty rudimentary as far as, okay, we have small customers, we have large customers, or maybe we have an in-between SMB or something. And maybe it's just based on number of users or something very easy to define and specific. But as the CS organization matures a little bit, and especially as you guys grow, there is revealed to be a need of intelligent segmentation. Sometimes that might be by vertical or by business unit or product line, or sometimes it's user behavior or a combination of all of those things. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. Is that something y'all have experienced as well, or what does that look like for Customer IO so far?
Yeah, and I think what you are illustrating there is just the number of ways that you can segment as well. And I think that often becomes a challenge of like, well, what does make sense? And there's, I think, a few different ways to think about this. And when it comes to segmentation, I think it's super important to align with the rest of the business as well and see how we're segmenting across product and how we're segmenting across sales as well, and that we're all kind of on the same page as that. So when we look at like an organizational level, I think oftentimes for us, the way we're segmenting is based on those plan types. I mentioned we have a self-service plan. So, looking at those self-service customers, what they're getting out of the product. We have a whole product squad that's focused on how do we make those self-service customers even more self-sufficient and make sure that they have the resources they need. So even though customer success isn't working with that segment of customers, that's also something that's really important to my team, because as the growth squad does that work to enable self-service customers, that also enables all of the customer success teams as well to be doing more with the customer strategically and less about hand-holding through the product. I think that's kind of an important way that we just align organizationally, and same thing for our CS managed plans as well. And looking at what are the needs of these customers going to be? How do those differ based on the kind of plan that they're working with? And then how do we make sure that our sales process is aligning with what we're offering from the CS side? And then how are we supplementing that experience or really driving the experience from the product side? I think that's kind of the first way that comes to mind. But apart from that too, I think, when we just look at our team, one thing that's been really important to me as we started to grow and hire more is making sure that we diversified on the customer success team as much as possible when it comes to our individual contributors, so that we can start to experiment with some of that segmentation and figure out what sticks, because when you hire a bunch of people that have different backgrounds, different things that they're really good at, it allows people to kind of find those niches, and then you can figure out like, okay, where does this make sense to replicate across the business? Because we're seeing a lot of momentum happening here. We're seeing that outcomes are really positive, and this is easy to replicate, versus, you might have somebody that's really interested in something, and you're like a particular industry comes to mind, for example. They may become a great resource on the team, but as you start to see that person learn and do more and create more material, you might realize it doesn't really make sense for us to segment this way across the business, because it'll become really hard for us to forecast capacity, and we're really kind of like limiting these people in that vertical. So I think just keeping a constant pulse on it, but leaving yourself open to the opportunities and tracking what are those things that really stick out as like, yes, this is something that we can do and we should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that kind of touches on something that, we here at SmartKarrot have seen and have kind of built our own philosophy around, which is just this idea of democratizing the customer success function in general. So like you touched on, aligning business wide, aligning objectives, initiatives, business initiatives, having that true North Star and having everyone aligned around that. So what does that really mean? I mean, I think for us and what we've heard is that basically giving everyone access to the same data, same insights, really, meaningful information across the board. And just, I think, kind of like you mentioned, that generally results in better business outcomes, having that team-wide access and implementation of customer success initiatives. And especially like you described, as you guys grow and you mature as a CS organization, you have increased specialization of roles. We all know, like, startups, you kind of wear a lot of different hats, you do a lot of different things that are well beyond your job title. But yeah, as you grow and you expand, you have that increased need for specialization. And with that, though, conversely, you run that risk of siloing people and data as well. So, you have implementation managers now, you have CSMs, you may have account managers or other people involved, product, sales, even, maybe to close some of the expansion opportunities or what have you. So yeah, it just becomes really, really important that everybody has access to the same insights about their customers and is clear on the overall business objectives. How are you guys cross-functionally collaborating, and you need a way to a platform to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think that brings up a lot of interesting points, and it's really cool to hear it in practice, what you're describing. And that kind of is a good segue, I think, to talk a little bit about one of those main business objectives, I think, that has been more and more prevalent. I at least that's what I've seen. And that's just identifying and executing on those expansion opportunities. So again, in the current climate, I think I heard a stat that was something like, it costs around 5 times more to bring on new net revenue as opposed to expanding existing accounts. So I think that investors and businesses alike have really seen that and are doubling down now on increasing that net recurring revenue. So I'm just curious to get your thoughts. Is that something that y'all have seen at Customer IO, or is that something your team is dealing with as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we're in somewhat of a unique position in that our tool isn't feature gated based on plan, for example. So when we think about expansion opportunities, it's really all driven by customer volume, by how many people they're contacting in the platform. And so as their business grows, our business grows, right? So when customer success managers are kind of identifying those opportunities, it's happening in parallel with the conversations they're having, because as their initiatives grow, as they're looking to cast a wider net with their audiences that they're contacting, then naturally comes the opportunity too to increase their plan and the number of contacts that are coming with that. So we actually made the decision a couple of years ago now to split out a contracts team from the rest of the core customer success function. So we have a central group of 4 or 5 people that are actually managing the renewals, as well as taking over any expansion or early renewal opportunities that come up based on growth.
Mhm.
And the customer success manager is really setting those opportunities up for success by making recommendations to the customer and letting the contracts team know where the customer is getting value out of the platform and what their growth looks like based on their conversations. But then the contracts team is able to come in and actually negotiate pricing and get all of the logistics in place to get a signature on an agreement that kind of detract from the customer success manager's role as really an advocate for the customer and really their skill set, which is to focus on strategic initiatives and product adoption and gathering feedback and, managing risk. So separating out that function has had a pretty big impact on our team. And I think the other thing that comes to mind that I'm starting to work with the contracts team on now as well is with having a self-service plan, we have all this opportunity to get people into our pipeline to upgrade on to a contracted plan that have kind of already like self-selected us as their vendor and have done a lot of the vetting themselves. So it's super efficient for us to have conversations with these people that have already been using our product, sometimes for years, that might just need a little bit more service from the customer success side, or might be at a volume where it makes sense for them monetarily to sign a 12-month agreement with them. And we can get, more of those premium benefits in place for them.
Oh, that's super interesting. In what you're describing there, it's something that frankly I haven't thought a lot about before. Is as far as certainly we see teams where the CSMs are in charge of all the other use cases, but also in addition to that, closing new revenue and expanding the accounts. But you bring up an interesting point where it almost seems like it can come across as a conflict of interest, maybe. Where you're trying to sell additional services or upgrade or expansion, upsell, whatever. But at the same time, that can come across as being, salesy, right? Like you're trying to get them to pay more. So whereas you're supposed to be the customer advocate. So that's very interesting, and something, like I said, I hadn't thought a lot about before. But that kind of brings back or drives home the point about specialization of roles. Like you said, it's even in some cases a different skill set. That's also why in some cases we see sales come in and take over, or account managers, or in your case, it's contract team. So I think that's great information. Now, I guess, I'm curious to hear more about, the specialization of roles. Makes a lot of sense to me. But how do the CSMs are still kind of surfacing those opportunities to the contract team, right? So what does that look like for y'all? I mean, I can think of a number of different ways that I've seen, but I'm curious to hear, what constitutes an opportunity, or how are your CSMs identifying those opportunities? How are they setting up the contract team for success, if that makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. So our CSMs have some visibility into, the usage that's happening on the product side as well. So our CSMs might get an alert that says like, hey, we're seeing that this account is increasing rapidly and that their product usage is getting to a point where maybe it is going to make more sense for them to upgrade to a new plan. In fact, they're probably going to actually save money by doing that because they may be incurring overage costs. So the CSM can kind of start that conversation and figure out what's going on with the customer. Is this a permanent thing, or is this something that, maybe we just need to help them get their volumes under control and maybe clean some stuff up a little bit? So the CSM is able to kind of do some initial vetting there. And then once they realize like, oh, okay, this actually is an opportunity to get them on a new plan that's going to be a better fit for everyone. At that point, they would put together some initial information about how they got to that point and pass that off to a contract specialist. Those are coming up in conversation regularly as well. Like we do quarterly success check-ins with all of our customers, which is, very similar to a QBR, where we're kind of going through the newer features on the tool and maybe talking about what's coming up on our roadmap so that we can make sure that we're aligning with our customers and their needs. So yeah, with those as well, it very naturally comes up where a customer might say like, hey, we're actually using a very similar tool on the product side and we're the marketing team, and there may be an opportunity to consolidate here. And so finding those opportunities too, just in regular conversation by engaging on whatever their overarching strategic goals are, a lot of stuff surfaces that way that maybe hadn't even come to mind for our points of contact until we have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Those quarterly reviews are always very important. Those regular cadences, of course, you have to maintain. Yeah, I mean, in that, but you also touched on, I think, a lot of what we hear about too, which is, basically I'll call them intent signals, right? So user behavior, just, measuring product engagement or adoption in some cases, or license utilization, or however it is you're measuring utilization. That's kind of one of the reasons we decided to introduce something we call SmartOps, which is just using some AI to surface some of these intent signals. To just talking about engagement, comparing it to industry standard benchmarks. On average, we see X amount percent increase in adoption for preceding an upsell or preceding a renewal. Same thing with risk intelligence and that sort of thing. So I think that the genesis of a lot of that was that, yes, I think teams are becoming more sophisticated in terms of the data that they have access to. But the converse of that is that there's a whole lot of data, right? There's a whole lot of noise in some cases. So how do you separate that signal from the noise? And how do you make that data meaningful? How do you contextualize it? How do you provide it in a time, at the right time? So yeah, that was the idea behind SmartOps, and I'm sure you guys are dealing with similar, data congestion in some cases, So just curious to get your thoughts on that. Is that something that y'all have encountered as well, or what does that look like for your team?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's also varying levels of access to different types of data too.
True.
So
Yep.
I think, this may sound super old school, but the way that we kind of started out by doing this is blocking all the CSMs on the team would block one day a month where they would kind of go in and do account reviews and figure out, okay, what are the things that I need to be proactively reaching out on? Because this is kind of an indicator that maybe something is a little bit wonky, or I can provide value to the customer here, or maybe this thing is happening and the customer doesn't even know. So we sort of manually started vetting the things that were going to be meaningful and have been able to kind of gauge over a period of time, like what results in the outcomes that we're looking for. So that's a way that we could kind of start a list. But there is certainly an endless amount of data. And I think some of the trick is like what's happening that we don't even know about, that we haven't thought about. Like, is there a feature in our tool that actually indicates that somebody's a power user and those accounts are more likely to renew? Like, how are we supposed to know what that feature is without the data? So I think now, we are starting to experiment and explore with more and more of these AI tools where you can just pump all of your data feeds into one place and compare it against your revenue data or your usage data and see like what is really driving these outcomes. And is that something then that we can foster from a CS perspective? And also being able to focus on those accounts that are healthy for growth, and then the accounts that aren't mirroring those behaviors as at-risk accounts. How do we put playbooks in place to mitigate that risk?
Sure, absolutely. And this is something I don't know that you kind of triggered as you were talking. One thing I've noticed is again, especially as the CS teams grow and they themselves are expanding and becoming more sophisticated, is I've seen some mirroring of what sales teams have done, which is having ops, like a CS ops, whether it's a single person or multiple people in the department. Just like traditionally, in larger organizations, more mature organizations, you have an established sales ops team who is kind of in charge of the data side of it, of logistical stuff, pipeline review and management, things like that. Where on the CS side, it takes the form of trying to spot those trends. I think we're doing some of that with the AI, but there's still always a place for human, involvement in that as well. I think where just creative thinking and that sort of thing. So yeah, we're actually seeing more and more CS ops personnel, especially leveraging, the reporting and analytics, business intelligence side of things, where establishing patterns or trends, just like you said, I wonder if, or we've realized that a certain amount of engagement with this specific feature really kind of seems to indicate that this kind of account is more likely to renew, or this kind of user that we didn't think of traditionally as a power user really is, or the account is more likely to expand when we can involve these kind of personas that we weren't really targeting before. So I think all of those are really great opportunities to uncover new expansion potential and sort of, really, honestly kind of make the CS team as a whole even that much more important to the overall business outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So I'm curious to get your take on this, but a lot of what we've heard in the past is really some frustration from CS teams or CS folks who feel like, they're asked to do a whole lot from the business side without, the business side really realizing how much they're asking, and without really equipping them with tools or access to this data, or hence the rise of CS platforms in general. So I'm just curious, my take on this is that as you guys become more important to the revenue aspect, generating more revenue, not just keeping the customer happy, but actually expanding, getting to target NRR numbers and that sort of thing. Is that something that you've experienced, and does that also give you a path to getting a better seat at the table, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say we're pretty lucky as a CS organization here because our customer our product is product growth driven. So
Sure. Yeah.
we've been bought into customer success from day one. And so it hasn't so much been a question of like proving what is the value that we're bringing to the table, but more that, we're invested in customer success as an organization. But I think you're exactly right that especially from an individual contributor perspective, it's important that they know and understand how they're impacting the business and what that looks like. And there's so many ways to look at that. And I think one of the complexities that we see as well is that it usually isn't just as simple as, oh, somebody did this action and it resulted in this great thing. There's so many touch points along the line, and like it can look so many different ways. But I think starting to look for what are those things that are trends that are worth focusing on, and not just picking the thing of the month that stands out as something that we can do, but what do we see time and time again where we have both qualitative and quantitative data that shows us that, okay, this is engaging from the product side, this is engaging from the customer side, we're getting like valuable insights, and we're also seeing that translate into revenue and longer retention. We're seeing customers renew over and over again. What are those patterns? And so I think it's super important to find those things. And I think the ops trend that you mentioned as well is certainly becoming almost a standard, I think, as you look at some larger organizations, and it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Excuse me. It makes so much sense just from a standpoint that there is so much data to go through. Yeah, I think that's something that we're focused on a lot this year as a CS org is just how do we put all those pieces together?
Yeah, absolutely. And just taking some of that administrative burden off your individual contributors, yeah, and it's very similar, to the sales organizations and in mature companies where, yeah, like a lot of the reporting, a lot of the pipeline maintenance and hygiene and stuff like that, data analysis in general is offloaded from your individual contributors, so they can just go do what they need to do. They can be talking to customers. They can be actually analyzing their own portfolio so that they know where they need to deploy their time, instead of queuing up a report or to send to management, or helping prepare for a board meeting or something like that. So yeah, I think that offloading a lot of the administrative burden from CSMs to, whether it's to an ops team, or obviously having a platform that enables a lot of this, makes it much more efficient and easier in general. I think those are very important, especially like you're talking about. I think this is something that's often overlooked. I think you can probably speak directly to this yourself, but just quality of life improvements for your CSMs, right? Just having that sort of job satisfaction, because I know that something that investors look at more closely now than ever before is employee satisfaction levels. It's always been there, but it's becoming more and more important as well. And just obviously retention of employees, it's costly to have employees, just employee attribution. So yeah, I'm just curious if that resonates with you, and being in the trenches, so to speak, yourself. Just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think something that you touched on there that is also a very important element of this is making that data accessible to everyone on your team, because the people that are going to figure out how to best use that data to do their jobs are the people that are doing the job. So it's kind of this tough balance of, you have to kind of shape things in a way that's going to make it easy to work with, but then not prescribing so much that people aren't able to use their creativity and almost be a little bit reactive with it to figure out how can we use this in a way that's maybe different than what we envisioned, or also where are their holes? Because when you give that to somebody and you empower them to, hey, explore, see what you can do with this, they're also going to come back with like, well, actually, we probably need this thing and this thing that isn't available currently. And if we had that, then we could get a more full picture. So yeah, I think as much as centralizing is important, it's also just important to empower your teams to understand the tools that they have available to them, so that they can figure out what's working and what's not.
Yeah, exactly. Not just giving them a bunch of data, but also making it meaningful, right? So definitely always a challenge. Well, I think that's a really good summation, Shannon, of some of the challenges, like we were talking about, of scaling teams and practices, as well as identifying and executing on those opportunities. Do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to add, or does that pretty much sum it up for you as well?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. I think, scaling is such a complex thing and involves so many different factors. And I think often when you hear CS leaders talk about scaling their programs, it sounds like we have this amazing, immaculate system in place and like we have all the answers. But I think just knowing that iteration is such a huge part of it, and
Yeah.
you're not ever going to get it perfect, but just trying and committing to those areas where you can see room for improvement, and then taking that and running with it, and continuing to make it work for your customers and keeping them and their journey as the central focus.
Absolutely. Couldn't say it better myself. So yeah, I hope everybody watching got a lot of value out of this. This is super informative and much appreciated, Shannon, for your time. Really loved the conversation, and yeah, I hope everybody got some value out of this, and encourage everybody to comment and add to the conversation as we go here.
Yeah, great talking with you, Joe. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thanks.